So moving on to our last topic of the day, we have the NFC East. So we have the Eagles, Giants, Redskins, Cowboys. You want to start us off with a little bit of what the divisions they will be playing this year?
Yeah, really interesting division going into 2020 is the NFC East. They're going to be playing the NFC West, led by the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Rams, the Cardinals. Then they're going to be playing the NFC North, the Ravens, the Browns. So, pretty tough schedule that this team is going to, or this entire division is going to have to play. So, especially some of their away games playing the Ravens late in the season at Baltimore for some of these teams playing in Cleveland late. I think it's going to be pretty tough going for this NFC East.
Yeah, I think even with those divisions they play, and I think just historically, no matter how good these teams are and bad these teams are, they do play each other very tough
Yeah.
within their divisional games. But I think starting off, I think the team that I'm most confident to win the division is the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
I think they have the best quarterback in the division. I think they have probably the best head coach in the division. I think just I mean, if you look at kind of Miles Sanders, he's been putting in a lot of work, and I expect him to have a pretty great season this year. But with the Eagles drafting Jalen Reagor, I think they're kind of and also trading for Marquise Goodwin, I think they're kind
Yeah.
of trying to solidify that wide receiver position that's been so hard for them the past couple of years with the drops they've had and having such awful receivers the past couple of years. I think they've made the right moves to become the top of this division.
Certainly. And I mean, they're coming off of a wild card loss to the Seahawks. And really, the only reason they ended up losing that game like they did is because they had their backup quarterback playing for most of that game. Carson Wentz kind of went down with a concussion with kind of a cheap hit by a defender on Seattle. But again, they went 9-7 last year. I can see them winning around 11 games this year, quite honestly, if they have a good start to the season. I know the Eagles kind of start off slow sometimes, but I mean, with their additions of, like you said, Marquise Goodwin, Darius Slay, guys like in the draft, they drafted Jalen Reagor. I know I have a bit of a question mark on Jalen Reagor in terms of his catching ability. I know he had some drops at TCU, but really no key losses for this Philadelphia Eagles team. I know they did lose Malcolm Jenkins and they lost Jason Peters, but those were two very old veteran players where they didn't really have that great of effect on the Eagles as you might think because of their big names. So again, with no key losses for this team, being healthy going into the 2020 season, I do think the Eagles are set out to win this division, and they always against the Cowboys. So if they can split against the Cowboys, I do think they're going to win this division.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the Cowboys and the Eagles are the cream of the crop of this division, and those two games that they're going to play each other are going to be very important for who's going to come out on top. But that being said, I think the Eagles are going to finish second in this division. I mean, they do have a great offensive side of the ball. They do have good players on their defensive side, but the big question mark is having Mike McCarthy as a rookie head coach with these Eagles and how Dak is going to be able to perform. I mean, there's with the money he will be paid. I mean, if Zeke is able to perform as well with his kind of his digression throughout the past couple of years, like we've talked about in some previous episodes, I think there's just a lot of question marks on how the Cowboys offense is able to be able.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, going into the Cowboys, the Giants, the Redskins, each and one of these teams have a new head coach going into the season, which is very interesting. These teams are definitely at a disadvantage with the whole COVID offseason, not really being able to implement their full offensive and defensive game plans, I think, each and every week. I think that will have an effect on some of the teams. Some of the roster turnover with the Cowboys, I think, is going to hurt them a little bit too. But I would expect them to go better than 8-8 like they were last season. I mean, this team ended up tagging Dak Prescott. They re-signed Amari Cooper. They re-signed Blake Jarwin, Sean Lee, Anthony Brown, some of their impact players, and they had a very good offseason. I mean, they signed both D tackles, Gerald McCoy and Dontari Poe, who are both very old at this point in their NFL career, but still really good. If you can get some contribute plays and contributions from guys like Alden Smith, HaHa Clinton Dix. They did get one of the best kickers in the entire NFL this offseason in Greg Zuerlein. I know they did lose Travis Frederick to retirement, which I think will be huge for this offensive line, but They lost guys like Byron Jones, Robert Quinn, Randall Cobb, Jason Witten, and Jeff Heath to free agency. And I know those are all big names, but at the end of the day, Byron Jones is a good player. I think he's a little bit overrated in today's NFL. Really just is not a playmaker, doesn't turn the ball over for the Cowboys, doesn't have any real eye-popping numbers for them. And just watching them, you can't even really put him on an island. I think he's just an above average cornerback, so I don't think they're losing too much with Byron Jones. But this Cowboys team also had an incredible draft, one of the best draft classes out of anybody in 2020, notably getting CeeDee Lamb and cornerback Trevon Diggs, and they got a potential center replacement, I think, in the 4th round. So I think this Cowboys team certainly should be better than 8-8 this season. I think they certainly can make a playoff push this season. But again, I do think the Eagles are really slated to be the best team in this division. And I do think the Cowboys are going to finish with a close second. And I think by week 17, they're still going to be pushing for that division.
Yeah, I think we might be set up for one of those week 17 kind of Eagles-Cowboys primetime games. Winner gets in the playoffs. I can definitely see that happening. I mean, even if the Eagles are a runaway for this division, I can see the Cowboys battling for a wild card spot because they do have such a great kind of offense with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Gallup at wide receiver. They have a great wide receiving core, and Mike McCarthy, his time with he is a Super Bowl winning head coach. He has a great offensive mind. He did have a great offensive mind. At the end of his Packers tenure, there were some question marks about kind of some of his play calling, but I am confident in Mike McCarthy at kind of getting the organization back together from the mediocrity that was Jason Garrett tender at head coach.
Yeah, I am as well. And talking about and kind of going off of Jason Garrett, I love how Giants fans the past 10 years have really been the number one people hating on Jason Garrett, kind of making fun of him. And now that he is their new offensive head coach, they're just so excited about Jason Garrett, what he can do with Daniel Jones. I think that's a bit ironic, but transitioning into the Giants, another team that got a new head coach in Joe Judge, something I also find ironic. The very worst, honestly, in my opinion, the worst core of players, the worst position group out of any team in the entire NFL last season, I believe, in my opinion, was the Patriots wide receiving core, along with the Dolphins offensive line. I think they're neck and neck for just the worst core of players in the NFL last season. And of course, the Giants got the former Patriots wide receiver coach, the former Patriot special teams coach, coming off of a season where the Patriots did not do good on special teams, coming off of a season where the Patriots are pretty disastrous at the wide receiver spot. So we'll see what Joe Judge can do at head coach for this Giants team. I think he'll be more of a motivator than anything. He's not really an X's and O's guy, which for a lot of organizations and a lot of teams can prove to be very great. We see that with John Harbaugh with the Ravens, but kind of going into it a little bit, they do have Jason Garrett as their new offensive coordinator, which I really don't love. They're coming off of a 4-12 season, and this offseason was pretty uneventful for the Giants, I would say. I mean, besides their coaching changes, they did lose Marcus Golden, who is a good edge rusher for this team. I mean, they really didn't have any key losses, and they didn't really have any key additions besides signing Blake Martinez. I mean, they had a pretty nice draft getting tackle Andrew Thomas early. Let's see if he can be kind of the tackle of the future for this team. They did get safety Xavier McKinney in the 2nd round. But, I mean, unless Daniel Jones, Darius Slay, Saquon Barkley, and company have huge jumps, I see this team winning around 4 games next season like they did this season.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to have some similar. I think they're going to have a similar record that they did last year. They didn't really make any eye-popping additions to make them have their record have such a jump. But with the signing of Joe Judge as their head coach, I think it was kind of more of like you said, kind of a motivational guy, and they're trying to get kind of the Patriot way into the Giant organization with the motivation and the high standard and having everybody held accountable. But going into the draft, I think they tried to get that tackle with Andrew Thomas to protect Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. But I mean, I look at that as kind of a poor draft pick. I think they could have got Andrew Jones a lot later in the draft, and they could have got someone better like Jedrick Wills, who I think was one of the best linemen in the whole draft. I think they really reached with Andrew Thomas. Kind of just shows how how poor the Giants could be at with their draft and scouting and stuff like that. I mean, that they definitely thought that there was their guy. We talked about that with the Raiders, thinking they outsmarted people getting Damon Arnett, but
Yeah.
I think the Giants kind of thought they outsmarted people getting Andrew Thomas, but he's a really big body, but he lacks the athleticism. Kind of has a little bit of a cement feet. He's not as good as the other linemen I thought. So I think that could be a potential bust for the Giants.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Arizona Cardinals arguably got a guy in the second round, third round, just as good as their guy that they got with the fourth pick in the draft. So I definitely think that was a bit of a reach for the Giants. And this offseason, I mean, it's good in the aspect that they didn't really get tied up in this big money contracts where it was going to cripple this team for 3, 4, 5 years, like we see the New York Jets kind of did last offseason, not this offseason. So it's good in that aspect. They really don't know what they have in a lot of players. But again, I really don't like this Giants offseason because they really just did not get better unless, again, we see significant jumps from guys like Daniel Jones, guys like Darius Slay, and guys like Saquon Barkley. But transitioning into the last team in this division, I think the Giants and the Redskins are going to be neck and neck for the last place in this division. I see both of these teams being pretty just not good next season. I mean, I do think the Redskins, again, will be the worst team in this division. I think the hierarchy for this division will be the same as it was in 2019. But looking at the Redskins, obviously the biggest move in the offseason not only was drafting Chase Young, who everybody thinks is going to be a generational edge talent, really solidifying that just pass rush for the Redskins to be, I think, top 15, top 10 in the entire NFL. But besides that, I mean, again, they got Ron Rivera this season after going 3-13. He kind of brought in some of his pieces. I know he got his backup quarterback from the Panthers. Really no significant losses for this team. I know they did bring in Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby, two pretty good cornerbacks, but again, I think they arguably had one of the worst drafts outside the first round. They had no second round picks, and they only had 7 more picks beyond the first round. I mean, really no significant pieces. So again, I do see this team winning around 3 or 4 games this season, unless we see a significant jump from Dwayne Haskins in 2020.
I mean, I really like the signing of Ron Rivera. I think behind Doug Peterson, he's the second best head coach in this division.
Yeah,
I mean, you saw what he did in Carolina, helping them lead them to a Super Bowl caliber. They were a Super Bowl team. I think he's a really good coach, and he knows how to rally the troops around him. But I mean, for the Redskins to be any good in this division and any good in the NFL, I think kind of have to make some changes. Dan Snyder, I think he has a little too much power in the organization, and you saw that when they drafted Dwayne Haskins, he was a hometown kid, and he kind of prompted the organization to draft Dwayne Haskins, even though that probably wasn't the right decision to make because we just don't know how Dwayne Haskins is going to be in the NFL. I mean, kudos to Dwayne Haskins training like the way he is this offseason. I mean, if you go on his Instagram, every picture is him outside throwing with someone, getting the work in, which he's an Ohio State guy, so I'm rooting for him, but I don't see Dwayne Haskins being that franchise quarterback that the Redskins are looking for. But I do think the Giants, like you said, the Giants and the Redskins are going to battle for the worst team in this division. And I mean, I might even be a little bit higher on the Redskins winning the division. I mean, not the last team over the Giants.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, this Redskins team just really lacks the weapons needed around Dwayne Haskins, around a young quarterback. They do have Terry McLaurin, who I think is one of the best wide receivers in this entire division. I think outside of the Cowboys, he's the best wide receiver in this division in terms of Eagles, Giants, Redskins. But besides that, you have an aging Adrian Peterson and really nothing else on that offensive side. They really don't have any offensive lineman talent to really warrant Dwayne Haskins kind of sitting back there, taking his time to throw, letting the wide receivers get open. So I do see the Redskins struggling this season. I do really see the Giants struggling this season. I think arguably more than the Redskins, again, like you said, because Redskins do have better coaching at this point than the Giants do. But again, I do think it is going to be between the Eagles and the Cowboys. I really don't like betting on either of these teams because either of these teams are very inconsistent year to year, and that is the Eagles and the Cowboys. But Cowboys on paper, again, are one of the best teams in the NFL, like they are every single season on paper. Jerry Jones always does a pretty good job of putting together a very talented roster. But I do think the kind of Super Bowl aspirations for the Cowboys have passed with kind of the signing of some of their big name players, especially Dak Prescott with 30 mil a year now. So I do think the Eagles are going to win this division, but I would certainly not be surprised to see the Cowboys come out of this division as victors and watch the Cowboys make a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are definitely kind of the odds-on favorite to win this division. I think the Cowboys can definitely fight with the Eagles to become the top of the division. I think they'll, but that being said, I think they will finish second. And then with the Giants and the Redskins, I think looking at the coaching staffs like we talked about, and the Redskins having a really solid front seven, I think that will help them win a lot of games. I think I'm more confident in the Redskins placing third in this division with the Giants finishing last.
Certainly, and just looking at some of the teams they're playing, I think every single team in the NFC West is significantly better, honestly, at this point than the Giants and the Redskins. And I think every single team in the AFC North is better than the Giants and the Redskins, except maybe for the Cincinnati Bengals. So if they're losing all of those games and then maybe splitting some of their kind of divisional games, I don't really see a big win total for this team. And even looking at the Cowboys and the Eagles, I think every single NFC West matchup is going to be troublesome for the Eagles and the Cowboys. They really don't have a great history of matching up against teams like Seattle, like the Rams, like the 49ers, and even the AFC North, you have the Steelers and the Ravens, both teams that the Eagles and the Cowboys have struggled with in the past. So I definitely don't see the Eagles or the Cowboys eclipsing 12 wins this season, but I do think both teams will hover around the 9-7, 8-8, kind of 10-6 area.
Yeah, I think they kind of really lost the luck of the draw with the divisions they have to place because arguably they're playing two of the best divisions in all of football. But kind of another point I want to make is I can definitely see Carson Wentz kind of having an MVP type season. I
Yeah,
really like Carson Wentz. You like him a lot more than I like him as the fifth best quarterback in the NFL.
yeah.
I would argue he's a little bit outside of the fifth, maybe six or five B. But I really like Carson Wentz. I can see him having a great season, and that's how the Eagles will be able to finish top of this division. But for watching, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think of the NFC East, who's going to finish first, who's going to finish last. Um, and also if you think Antonio Brown will sign to any NFL teams. But thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you in the next one.